Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Driving with Care second edition update training. My name is Nicole Myers, and I'm here with my business partner, Christina Daniel. We are part of Ignite Change Consulting, a contracted business through the state of Colorado to provide driving with care and interlock enhancement counseling training to providers in the state of Colorado. So today's training is going to be all about the updates that occurred in the transition from the first to second edition of Driving with Care. So the assumption in the training is that everyone viewing this recording, and we have a few members here who will stay muted most likely with cameras off during the recording, but the assumption is that everyone definitely has attended the full 2 or 3 day Driving with Care training prior to watching this video. We're just going to provide a high-level overview and summarize some of the major and minor changes that occurred between the 2 editions. Before I start the formal presentation, I will just let you know that, again, my name is Nicole. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and licensed addiction counselor, and I've been working with this population for around 10 years, and am very grateful for the opportunity to provide these trainings across the state, and really enjoy and appreciate the Driving with Care and interlock enhancement counseling interventions and the theoretical approaches that underlie them, being mainly cognitive behavioral restructuring and motivational interviewing. So I'm really excited to be here with you today.
And I'm Christina Daniel. I am a licensed professional counselor and a licensed addictions counselor. As Nicole stated, we have really appreciated being able to work with so many providers across the state and working with the authors, as they've given us so much guidance on the reasoning for certain things and how we're doing this. And so this is just a really neat opportunity for us. I have been working for with this population for about several years, since 2007. And so really excited to be able to share these updates with you all, and really excited to continue spreading this curriculum around our state. So thank you. And Nicole, I will turn it back to you.
All right, thanks. Let's go ahead and get into it. So starting with some underlying assumptions of the people that are attending this training and or viewing this recording. Like I mentioned, you must have already completed the full 2 or 3 day Driving with Care training prior to attending or watching this particular update, because again, it's just an update. This is not the full training. We're also assuming that you are credentialed, meaning registered with DORA appropriately to provide these services, and your agency or company also is licensed to provide DUI treatment and education in the state of Colorado. You are not operating on an abstinence-only philosophy when facilitating this curriculum. Of course, we understand that different agencies, different companies have different orientations towards recovery, but just to be clear, in terms of this curriculum, Driving with Care specifically is not an abstinence-only curriculum. It is an expectation, as it's always been, that all participants, your clients, receive a physical hard copy of their own workbook to work through the curriculum. That's part of the intervention, in fact, is for them to have their own hard copy. And we can go into details about that later, especially now that you may be transitioning from the first to second edition. And the last item here, that you utilize best practices to facilitate groups, and that you understand motivational interviewing, cognitive behavioral therapy, and the underlying goals of the Driving with Care program, which, one of which is that it's a very sociocentric model, meaning we're moving away from exclusively the egocentric psychotherapy model, and we're integrating the importance of the responsibility of one's responsibility to their community. So some of the changes to the curriculum in the second edition are pretty subtle, a change in words, or maybe a worksheet is numbered a little bit differently. And others are more obvious, maybe some major worksheet changes, and we're going to go through some of those throughout this training. Please review the participant workbook. So that's the book that the clients are getting before each lesson, and review the provider's guide for the most salient points. We do want to note that the provider's guide that you received during your initial training, it's the first edition and has not yet been updated to the second edition. So still keep using that provider's guide that you have. It is currently in process of being updated, so more to come. Hopefully sooner rather than later, you will get an email or other type of notification communicating to you that it's here. You can get the second edition of the provider's guide, but authors aren't there quite yet. So please still lean on that, all, whatever it is, 350 pages of it, for all of the really essential information to help you be the best facilitator that you can be for this curriculum. So now we're going to start kind of getting into the nitty-gritty and looking specifically at some changes in level 1 education, level 2 education, and level 2 therapy. So level 1 education should be at least 6 sessions according to the authors. That is like the most preferred way to run it. The whole point of this is just to communicate that it's not effective to hold marathon level 1 education groups where, you're holding like 6 hours on a Saturday and 6 hours on the next Saturday, and then they're done. Psychologically, we just know in terms of learning that that's not a great way for people to understand and learn and internalize new information. So, remember to look at the state rule as well, the Behavioral Health Administration most recent state rule. Currently, it does identify that level 1 education consists of 12 hours, of course, of DUI education over a minimum 3-day period, and not more than 4 hours can be conducted in one calendar day. So you can see there's a little bit of difference between that, what's written in rule, and the author's recommendation of at least having 6 sessions. So remember to keep BHA rule in mind, and just please avoid running level 1 education as a marathon intervention or group. One major change to level 1 education is that the Driving with Care inventory, also known as a pretest, is no longer required. So that has been taken out as a requirement of the curriculum. So this is the item that used to be administered during the orientation session and then re-administered in the last session that the client attends. And again, that's no longer required. There is a lesson progress rating scale at the end of each section, and we have an example of that in the next slide we can go ahead and look at. So at the end of each session, right before you end the group, it asks the participant to rate themselves on knowledge or competence or understanding of certain skills that were learned during that session. So this is just an example from session 3 and level 1 education, where it's asking the person to rate themselves as being able to identify specific beliefs that led to impaired driving. And so it's a really nice way to gauge someone's understanding of the group content. I'm going to go back to the previous slide. Make sure that you're keeping track of the laws in your state and update the information that you share with the updates that you have found as part of your own research. So we will send you a legal supplement, the most recently updated legal supplement, as part of attending this updated training as a Word document. It's currently being updated again. So just like with various editions of workbooks, laws can change quicker than publications can change. And so I think the onus is on us as facilitators to look at the Department of Justice website, the CDC website, to really lean on our resources to kind of quickly or not so quickly gather the information that we need that's most relevant and most current to share with our clients and participants. And teach or show them, if they're willing to listen, on how they can find the most updated data themselves as well. Some additional changes for level 1 education. So lesson 4 specifically has some different worksheet numbers. So just a heads up, if you provide level 1 education to review lesson 4 in the worksheets, the content is very similar to the first edition, but they're just broken apart and numbered differently. So when you first look at it, it's like, whoa, this is a lot more than it used to be. It's not really more content, it's just organized differently. So we have an example here to show you. So you can see how the worksheets are broken up, the tasks are broken up a little bit. And so just a note that it's not more work, it's just presented in a little bit of a different way to increase client understanding. I'm just going back to the previous slide to cover the second bullet point. In lesson 5, you'll be pleased to know that the criteria in worksheet 14 are now related to DSM-5 instead of DSM-4. So that's been updated to reflect the most current diagnostic criteria in manual. Looking at level 2 education specifically now, participants, again, no longer have to complete the Driving with Care inventory, just like level 1 education. There is also progress rating scales at the end of each lesson in level 2 education. That's the screenshot that I showed you where we're rating, or a client is rating their own confidence in the skills learned specific to that week's content. TAP charting, so thinking in action patterns, charting is now weekly instead of daily, and it is expected to be completed at the beginning of each lesson. So just to jog your memory, here's a quick image. So this is TAP charting, and this is from the new curriculum. So again, this is now asking the client to rate during the past week. So they're doing this at the beginning of each session. During the past week, write your thoughts about, did you think about drinking or using? Were you somewhere where you could? Did you actually do it? Did you think about driving, etc.? So similar, but again, it's weekly now. Just going back to the previous slide, there is additional information about marijuana and THC throughout the curriculum, which is nice, certainly since the first edition, as we all know, marijuana has become legal in the state of Colorado and many other states. And so that has been an interesting area, an interesting thing to navigate as DUI providers and substance use counselors. And so in the second edition, it's really nice that it brings in a lot more data and information and physiological impact, for example, of THC in marijuana. So that's great. And then it just is identifying here in table 2.1 in level 2 education, remember to use the legal supplement, which we will send to you, and verify that the information hasn't changed. So I'm going to show you an example. In the previous edition, because of previous laws, high BAC was listed as 0.17. Now, currently, with current laws, high BAC is considered 0.15 or higher. So you can see, in this criteria, BAC priors, all of the numbers have been updated to reflect more current laws. So we're just giving you a heads up, like, hey, right now, high BAC is 0.15. Maybe at some point in time, while we're using this second edition, perhaps the BAC will be changed again per law. I'm not sure. But if it is, again, just remember to be familiar yourself with current laws so that you can update this for your clients accordingly. But as it is now, with this image on the slide, it's been updated to reflect what is actually occurring in the law right now. I'm going to go back because I can't remember if I skipped a bullet point. Nope, we're good to go. Okay. Additional changes, level 2 education. In lesson 3, just a heads up that things have been shifted and moved a little bit. So same content, but moved around to increase clarity for the participants, and it's just a better flow of content for them to understand. There are now 5 rules of thinking instead of 6, just as an FYI. So that's a kind of minor update. And then for worksheet 52, which I'm going to show you on the next slide, it's the mood appraisal survey. A note to you, if the participant score is 13 or higher, we really highly suggest that the participant is scheduled either right after that group session, or, however you can work that out. They likely need a little bit more assessment around safety or additional supports needed. So this is the mood appraisal survey. And you can see this is where assessing mood and emotion like depression, nervousness, problem sleeping, disturbing thoughts, discouraged, unhappy. And so again, if someone is scoring a 13 or higher, just a little flag for you as a counselor to check in with them, just see if they need any extra services and potentially conduct a safety assessment if indicated. If, maybe once you start talking to them, you're picking up on some suicidal ideation or dangerous, risky behavior type things because of their mood. Just a heads up for you as providers. And then lesson 12 in level 2 education, it is no longer recommended to bring a guest to the group. I think there is a lot of feedback that there were some confidentiality concerns with bringing a guest, a family member, a support person to group. It is still definitely recommended for participants to talk in the group about their natural support network and how it is for them. Do they want it to be different? Is it great? Could it be better? So we're still talking about that because obviously it's, someone's social network and support network is very important regarding sustainability of meeting and maintaining recovery goals. But again, we are not welcoming those people into the group any longer. If you remember level 2 education entry points, so this means that, in a perfect world, we may be running closed groups where we have the same group of 8 participants, lesson 1, all the way through lesson 12. But I think most of us live in a world and our agencies are set up to actually accommodate open rolling admission groups because it's just more realistic for our population and our agency. So keeping that in mind, there are certain lessons that it is not appropriate for clients to come in as their first session. These have not changed. So if you're used to this, if you have seen this time and time again, just wanted to point out to you again that there are certain sessions that when someone's starting, they shouldn't start in that session. And that's just because it's tied directly to what was learned in the previous session. So you can see here, basically the numbers that are missing are the numbers that someone cannot come in on. So they cannot come in on session 4, 7, or 9. And that's because 4 is directly tied to 3. 7 is directly tied to 6, and so on. And so they may just be very lost in the content, and it's not ideal to bring them in on that kind of like part 2 of those 3 session sets. Again, these have not changed. So these are the same as in the first edition. Moving on to level 2 therapy, some examples of major and some more minor changes. Again, similar to education, there are now 5 rules of thinking instead of 6, so just a heads up to you. There is a Driving with Care session progress scale at the end of each session, just like in Driving with Care Education 1 and Education 2. And then there is what's called an AWRE, or Assessing Weekly Exposures charting mechanism every week. And this replaces the AOD monitoring chart. So I'm going to go to the next slide because it's an example of the AWRE. So this is the Assessing Weekly Risk Exposures charts. So they are recording weekly high-risk exposures, high-risk thoughts, high-risk feelings, and high-risk situations for both relapse and recidivism. So you can see on the left, they put the date for the week that they're charting on, which would be the week previous to sitting in group, number of times thought about drinking or using, number of times when there are situations where they had access to drinking or using, did you drink or use, And if you did you think about driving? So again, this is a weekly AWRE charting protocol that replaces the AOD monitoring chart. Most sessions have not only a CB map exercise, so that's our cognitive behavioral map, one of the most important, arguably, interventions in this curriculum and kind of what it's all based upon with that cognitive behavioral restructuring. So most sessions will begin with the CB map exercise, and then they also have what's called a thinking report of some kind in each session. So I'm going to move ahead a couple slides just to show you an example of a thinking report. Basically, it's another way to do a CB map. If you look at this, so this is an example of a thinking report in session 3. So if you remember, session 3 in level 2 therapy is all about problem outcomes and addiction. And so this thinking report is asking the client or participant to use an event that happened to you that made you think you wanted a drink or wanted to use. And they're just working through writing, talking, drawing, however you set it up, the event, thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and beliefs, and the outcome. And so again, structured very similarly to the CB map, but there are thinking reports similar to this to further explain and explore the session content in most sessions. And I already mentioned this last bullet point in the education curriculums. Information on cannabis and THC was added throughout the material. So I think most people are really happy to hear that, because it is a lot more prevalent, at least legally now in Colorado, than it used to be. Moving on to some additional level 2 therapy alterations. Worksheet 8, similar to what I mentioned before, it's based on DSM-5 criteria, so now it's fully updated to the diagnostic manual that has been most recently published, just in time probably for another version to come out, but knock on wood, we're current as of today. Worksheet 18 has just a little bit of different language. So if you're super used to facilitating these groups and using the first edition, just remember to please use the updated language when you're discussing thinking errors. A lot of research and work on the author's side of things went into updating that language to be more effective. And then in sessions 8 and 9, just as a heads up, stress, depression, and anger are presented and framed and discussed a little bit differently than in first edition. So again, we don't have time today to go into that in detail, but we just wanted to offer you a heads up, like, hey, maybe take a second, third look at sessions 8 and 9 before you present the second edition of those groups, because it's a little bit different. And then worksheet 24 on page 115, if you're interested, and we'll send out this slide deck as well, so you have all of this at your fingertips, has an additional column to add skills. So taking the intervention that next step and asking clients to not only understand the material, but add skills to start practicing what they're learning. Similar to level 2 education, session 16, guests are no longer invited to the group session. So yes, we are absolutely talking about support systems, but we are not inviting those people physically to group anymore. Worksheet 51, again, this is just a heads up, in session 18, provides a new and different way to conceptualize and look at lifestyle balance for the client. And worksheet 52 uses the updated thinking error language previously mentioned. And at the end of the curriculum, there are no more therapy projects. So for extended treatment options, that is a handout that we will send you as well. It's really based on assessment. So, if someone is track A, then the 21 sessions of therapy is sufficient to meet those track A hours. But if they're track B, C, or D, their additional hours are going to be basically based on their clinical assessment. And if you have to refer out, that's okay. Meaning you assess someone has some struggles with grief. Maybe they haven't resolved some grief, or they show symptomology of maybe like ADHD, or they show symptomology of some depression. We're really trying to assess what is going to help this person identify some of the things that may have led to drinking and driving. And if they have a substance use disorder, that problem use, that's what we want to target. And so extended treatment services are really based on individualized patient-centered assessment, and we want any services that they're receiving to fulfill track B, C, and D and level 2, 4 plus requirements to be very much centered around their own individualized assessment and treatment plan. And I can't remember if I already said this, but we do have a list of extended treatment options that we will send you. It's a document to kind of help you think through some things that may be applicable to this population that you can assess for. Same. Oh, did I hear someone unmute?
It was me. Keep going. That's fine.
Okay. Level 2 therapy entry points, similar to level 2 education. These are the same. So nothing has changed here. We are just bringing your attention to the fact that this exists. So just a friendly reminder that most of us facilitate open enrollment, running enrollment groups. Sessions 4, 7, 9, 11, 15, 18, I think I got them all, are tied directly to the session before. So the sessions listed here on the screen are okay to be the participant's first session. Remember, they are required if they're coming in the middle or the end of the curriculum to first attend kind of an orientation session with you or another staff member prior to jumping right in, just so that they understand what's happening and what's expected of them. Have a little baseline of the curriculum, but otherwise there are some 0 entry points. And so you can refer back to this or the provider's guide. They're the same in your provider's guide for no entry. Chris, I think it is time to hand it over to you. Sorry, I just kept on rolling.
Hey, no, that's okay. That's okay. Well, I am going to talk about just some reminders of things you do probably remember from the first time you got trained. And so we're just going to spend some time reviewing those and hitting on some of those really important points to remember, and then go from there and give you that information. So these are one of the most important pieces I think that Driving with Care gives us is the convergent validation model. And that is taking what others report about the participant or the client, what they report about themselves, and any assessments that you get when you're working with them. And so when we think about where the truth for the client actually lies, it's probably somewhere in the middle of all of those things, right? Their probation officer may see them in a certain way, in a certain light. They may see themselves there in a certain way. The social services worker that works with them may see them in another way. And our job is to kind of find where that truth lies for them. And so we want participants to self-report the information for us as much as possible. We know as providers that self-report is most objective when we collect it in a standardized format. When we can get multiple measures and ask them multiple types of assessments, when they trust us and rapport is established, and if we use the normative basis of especially the psychometric testing that we receive based on this population, right? Is everything normed for DUI offenders? Is everything normed toward a certain population? And so we want to make sure that we are looking at the client's self-report and really hear what they're saying about themselves. And then we compare it to the other data that we get. We know that sometimes participants don't tell us exactly what is reported in their arrest report or exactly what is reported in the police report or the probation report. And so we don't want to see self-report ever as invalid or denial. We want to see it as a valid representation of where the client is at that point in time. We need to know where they are. And if we don't treat it as lying, but treat it as them not disclosing because it's not safe for them, we can have a different relationship with the client from that very first part. And so we really want to make sure that we are honoring the fact that self-disclosure is hard from the very beginning. We know in Driving with Care, self-disclosure is such a huge part of the learning process and the growth process, that it's going to take some time to build that connection. So the self-report piece is really, really key, and really looking at that as just one source of data and treating it as such. And then we look at the other report data and recognize that they are double subjective. They have the perspective of the person who gave the assessment. They have your perspective of reading what someone else's assessment was. And maybe it was based on self-report of the client. Maybe it was based on some other information. And so we really want to make sure that we're taking that data for what it is and working with our probation and other partners of getting that data and recognizing that the client may have a very different perspective of the situation, and where we meet them is kind of in the middle somewhere. And so we also know that that other report may be difficult to standardize. So we could get information from, like I said earlier, DHS, probation, parole officers, police records. All of it could come to us differently, and not everyone has had the same trainings in every single thing that they're giving us to report in. So we need to take it, check it out, and then that's really where the convergent validation model comes in handy, because we take what others report and self-report. So we have our blue client over here on the right-hand side of the screen, and you can see that the other report and the self-report are pretty close together, right? So that means there's not a lot of variation, and that truth for where we're going to meet the client is somewhere in that middle where that green line is. On the other hand, our red client over here on the left-hand side is really far away. That D and E line are a lot further away. And that means we are going to have a little bit more negotiation with the participant, and with maybe what our reports are back to the probation officer too, like where the person is working and the things that they are seeing in the change for the person, right? Because they started out much further away. And I think it's really important that as we look at these, that we are trying to find the truth about where to meet the participant somewhere in the middle of those reports. The other thing, so as we're looking at using the convergent validation model and the types of assessments that we know we need to look at and the things we need to assess, we want to make sure that we are looking at alcohol and other drug screening and assessment. Are they using other substances? How often do they use other substances? We think this is probably a pretty standard piece of most people's intakes, but we have to make sure that people are getting that information. We also want to take into consideration their criminal justice history and their risk, need, and responsivity needs based on their criminal justice history. Are they at risk for recidivating in any way? Are there other crimes that we maybe need to take into consideration as we're looking at the types of services they need? What are their needs? How can we be the most responsive to them as possible? Do they have co-occurring disorders that need to be addressed? How can we assess for those needs? What is their level of cognitive functioning, and do they have a traumatic brain injury? So we know that screening for those are very important, and for people to have an effective group experience, they need to be able to keep up with the group. They need to be able to participate in group actively. And maybe folks with a lower level of cognitive functioning or a traumatic brain injury may not be able to participate in group settings the way we usually have them. So what are the needs they have, and are there other ways to support what they have going on, and being able to still give them the information and to support their DUI treatment the way that they need? Do they have adverse childhood experiences? Are there grief and loss that they are maybe bringing into session and needs further support in order for the behavior of driving while impaired to shift and change? So we want to make sure that we are screening for all of these aspects and using that assessment to drive the additional services that they may need. So as Nicole mentioned earlier, we don't have those extended therapy projects anymore. We do extended treatment options. So it is no longer acceptable to run a person back through the beginning of the curriculum after they have completed it. We need to use the assessment that we have looking at these things to drive what additional services they need. And so that is a really important piece of why we do all of these assessments, and then how are we going to add the services that they're getting. So really just talked about this. So assessment must drive all of the services. We know as providers that it is a dynamic process. We know the first time we do an assessment with a person, we may not get all the information we need. And as we get to know them, as we see their participation in group, as they share more, we are constantly assessing in those group settings if there need to be changes to their treatment plan, if they need to be maybe changes to other screenings that they may need, and really looking at what services may help them be more successful or most successful while they're in our care. We know that intake must be separate from the administration and interpretation of assessments. And so many of our organizations have an intake process that could include some assessments, and that's fine. But if you need to do additional assessments, trying to keep those things separate so that way the client can get that time for a really good self-report with you. It may take several appointments to get those screening tools or assessments done and completed, but we cannot postpone entry into Driving with Care if the assessments aren't all completed. And so it really is important that as soon as someone is able to join the group, even if an assessment is not completed, that we allow them to join that group in the next session, if it is one of those sessions that allows for new participants and they've kind of had that orientation session and know kind of what is expected of them in a group. The minimum areas we need to assess, this looks like a huge list, but what we know is we've always been required to assess for these. We know that doing a really comprehensive assessment with someone coming into services will touch on all of these things, and we will be able to provide the supports that they need. And so these are the minimum areas we need to explore with a participant as they're coming in. And most of us do this in our intake, in our assessments, and throughout the process with our participants. Excuse me. And so we want to make sure that you are giving them a really good assessment. And as we've been told many times by our partners at the BHA, we don't treat DUIs, we treat people who've gotten a DUI. And so one of the things that comes along with people is that they may have a ton of things that have happened in their lives that make it harder for them to be successful. And so it's really important that we assess what those needs are and create our treatment plan with them to address those other areas that they may need in addition to the driving while impaired conviction that they've had. Driving with Care has based their levels of education and treatment on a lot of research. The authors, truthfully, team, are some of the smartest people I have ever talked to. and I feel like I have a very good vocabulary, and they have an amazing vocabulary. They have done a lot of research on both like the methods with participants, norming things on this specific population, a lot of research on the policies and practices in other states and how people have served this population, and have really based this curriculum on all of that research and what the best outcome can be by using all of the cognitive behavioral restructuring, those thinking reports, the information and education that we're sharing, and sometimes that repetition of what they're learning and then practicing at home and bringing back and reporting to us. So they have done so much research, as you can see in the provider's guide. That is well over 300 pages. That information is fascinating to read and really helpful as we go through the curriculum. They used and helped develop the ASUDS and the ASUDS revised. And so they are looking at norming the assessment on people who have driving while impaired behavior and using that to continue to figure out what the best treatment modalities would be. Motivational interviewing is huge throughout the curriculum. A lot of the worksheets and information and the activities that we do with the participants are based on motivational interviewing principles. And as you're going through the curriculum as a facilitator, I know I use the MI style a lot during this curriculum, and really working with participants and that, spirit of collaboration and working together. And then the other data that informs what level of education and treatment is needed is that blood alcohol concentration level, or the participant's refusal to have that taken if they have prior arrests or convictions or prior driving while impaired education or treatment. So we want to make sure that we are matching their level of our level of responsivity to what their level of criminogenic need is, right? So if they've had these things in the past, or there were other indications that a higher level of care might be needed instead of just going through level 1 education, maybe they needed level 2 and level 2 treatment. We look at all of these things to make sure that the placement is appropriate for participants. We know that we as clinical providers get a lot of information and have a lot of resources with our participants. As we are getting more information from the Behavioral Health Administration and working to make sure that our DUI treatment services in our state are the best that they can be, we're looking at how we best serve participants. Again, not treating a DUI, treating a person. And so if we're doing our assessment and we're seeing what is needed, the education or track level may be raised with clinical justification. That doesn't mean we as clinicians just do it on our own and don't tell anyone else on the team what's happening. We need to confer with our probation officer partners, with other partners that are serving this participant, to talk through why we think that needs to happen, what services may need to be added, and make sure everyone is on the same page with that. But we can have clinical justification for raising that track level. We also should not reduce the track level we see someone in, because it may not be appropriate clinically or in terms of the DMV requirements. So the Division of Motor Vehicles has some expectations of our participants that are in a separate administrative path than the treatment path. And so it's really important that we don't try to change that track to a lower level, because it may impact their ability to get their license back and things like that. So we want to be really, really thoughtful and really use clinical justification if any changes are needed. If no blood alcohol concentration is available, so it was either not taken or it has been misplaced, the placement is based on clinical justification. And so many times we will get the recommendation before they come to us, but if that recommendation hasn't happened, you would base it on your assessment, you would base it on the information you have and which place you think that they need to be. And a refusal of any blood alcohol concentration places the offender in track B, D, or level 2, 4+, depending on the previous convictions they may have. So it's really important that you understand what happened at the beginning phases of their DUI conviction or DWI conviction as they come into the treatment with you. This next slide, and many of us are probably aware that level 2, 4+ did happen in 2017. So now it's been around a while, although it still feels, I think, relatively new to some of us. And so this was developed for folks who have 3 or more prior AOD driving convictions. And any BAC or other drug level or test refusal. The interesting part about level 2, 4+ is it's not based on like hours completed and just being done. It is a minimum of 180 hours of treatment over not less than 18 months. And they have to meet, the clients or participants have to meet certain competencies and levels to continue to be done with the treatment. So it is really a much more intensive service line And there are times where maybe a level 2, 4+ client would be appropriate for driving with care if they've never had it before or they had it a long time ago. But if people have been through driving with care several times, maybe we need to consider that they need something very different and they may not be appropriate for driving with care. And so we want to make sure that we're really assessing a level 2, 4+ client individually and not just assuming they go in certain tracks and automatically putting them in driving with care. We want to make sure that it is appropriate based on their prior history. And for many folks, I believe, this is Christina's personal opinion in this, that it would be very few and far between that a person who's at that level of having 3 or more DUI convictions would be appropriate for driving with care if they've had it several times in the past. But again, clinical justification and assessment will drive the services throughout any of the DUI treatment paths. And so this, again, this is very similar to what Nicole showed earlier, and it will be in your legal supplement that you get with the most updated version. And so you will see this does have the 0.15 or higher is considered a high level blood alcohol concentration, and where the level 2s tracks A, B, C, and D put folks into their tracks. It is, again, I just can't stress enough, because I think this was a pretty common practice, that when folks got to the end of driving with care and they finished all of their path, many people just put them back in because they didn't know what to do for the rest of their hours. Those hours do need to be based on assessment and not just cycling them back through driving with care. And so it really is important to look at those assessments, talk to the participants about what their needs are and what they want to work on for those treatment hours, and how you get those done can be with partner providers. You don't have to be able to provide everything in your organization, but you do have to have strong working relationships with your partners so you can make sure that the treatment the person is getting outside of your walls really does meet their DUI requirements and is following the treatment plan that you had for them in the DUI, so you can be true on their discharge summary and everything that they need to be able to accomplish in the DUI treatment world. So the next thing we're going to talk about are things that haven't changed in the curriculum. If you hadn't reviewed your provider's guide because it's intimidating and thick, please review your provider's guide. There is a ton of information in there that is very relevant, very valid, and has a lot of detail about the theoretical framework we're working in with driving with care. As Nicole mentioned earlier, there is an update coming soon, and it is still under revision and things like that. But the first edition one, the information and the outline for the curriculum is still very, very valid for the second edition as well. You have your certifications, your qualifications for a reason. Use your clinical judgment to serve the participants. It is really important that you know you're the expert in their care. And so use that judgment, use your knowledge of them, and give them the best care possible. And then just as a reminder, education is not therapy, and we shouldn't treat it as such. And so we want to make sure that we are keeping the therapeutic approaches in the therapy and the educational approaches in the education. So, and we know that our clients have higher levels of AOD disruption and psychosocial problems. We know that to be true, or they wouldn't be in our group. And so it really is important that we continue to provide this education and support with them as they learn and grow and as they develop these new skills. So the additional materials you will receive are the extended treatment options and the Colorado tracks and levels and the legal supplement. And so those are 2 documents you will receive after this training. And then you'll continue to look at the BHA website, the Behavioral Health Administration website, for updates to those as they may come out. I do think that the BHA is very good at sending out updated information and sharing information with all of the providers in the state of Colorado. And so that will continue to happen as things change and progress in our state. We're now going to talk about, if you've been doing the first edition for a really long time, how do you transition to the second edition? And there are some options you have. So if you use groups with rolling admissions or groups that are in the process of using the first edition, it is best to close off admission into that group and have that group complete the delivery cycle of the first edition. So we want to stop letting folks in, finish out with them, and then you would start clean with the second edition. And that's really what number 2 says. When implementing the second edition, it's best to start a new group for the implementation. The first edition workbooks are still available, and you can still order them from Sage Publishing. Some folks, right, may want to continue using the first edition while in the transition process, and that is totally okay. You just want to make sure, though, that as you can get to the second edition, then everyone, all of the clients, get the second edition workbooks as well. You can continue to use the first edition's provider guide, and the guidelines for lessons and sessions delivery in section 3 will still apply. And then, as we've said, an updated version is in development. Can't get my thing here. There is an updated copyright information and permission to copy. So once you've now had the second edition training, you will need to get the second edition permission to copy and review the updated copyright information. We have been sending electronic versions of the second edition out to our participants. It is very important, and you will need to sign an attestation that you will not share the electronic version because it is protected material. It is very important to the authors, to anyone who has not had this training. And so the participants can never get an electronic version of the workbook. They have to have a hard copy of the workbook. They need to physically write in those sections. It has been asked if we can give them a section at a time. Do we have to give them the whole workbook at a time? Because there's a lot of flipping, like to the master assessment plan and back to the TAP charting or the AWRE charting. They need to get the whole book at one time. And that is how it should be delivered to them before they start group. And so it does need to belong to them. It does need to be in whole, and you cannot give it to them electronically. You can order from Sage Publishing still. The BHA has the electronic versions that they can share with you. You will need to probably get them copied in your own vicinity. So some folks need to take the copyright permission to, or the copy permission to like a copy shop in your town. Some people have the capacity with their copy machines to do it in-house, and others order from Sage. It is okay to bill the clients you serve for the cost of that material. You shouldn't be overcharging for the book. If the book costs you $20, don't charge the clients $50 for the material. But it is really important that the books get to the clients before they start, that they get them in whole, and that you give them the appropriate edition that you're working with them on. And those are the big updates for the Driving with Care updated material. I'm going to stop sharing. And we hope that if you have any questions about using the second edition guide, you can reach out to your representative at the Behavioral Health Administration, or also Nicole or myself at Ignite Change Consulting, and we will be able to help you or point you in the right direction if you have questions, and we'll be able to provide support that way. Nicole, is there anything else you want to add?
I can't think of anything. No. Thank you for viewing the recording, if that's how you have come by this training. and again, reached out to your BHA licensing specialist and or Webster Hendricks for specific questions around the second edition curriculums, how you can get your hands on them, and any other questions you have about DUI related services. Thank you.
Thank you so much.